Good morning. I'm Fiona MacArthur. I thought I'd do my little chat out here in overlooking the farm. We live in a beautiful place between Sydney and Brisbane, about 30 k's out from the coast, on 200 acres of pretty well swampland, or we're called wetlands now. But half the time it's dry as a bone and the other half it's underwater, and we get lots of wildlife. We have some cattle walking around, but they're not really ours. We just name them and talk to them and feed them kitchen scraps. But yeah, it's a wonderful place to live, and I thought I'd share it with you this morning. So I'm Fiona MacArthur, and I write outback medical books for Penguin Australia, and I'm very excited to be talking to you today about the BUSH Telegraph. So the BUSH Telegraph is actually set up between Winton and Windora in outback Queensland, so a small medical centre in my fictional town of Spinifex. And yeah, I'm really excited about bringing this book to you today. I might just read the first little bit just to give you an idea what the blurb says. So, small towns and gossip go together like birds and trees. And it does sometimes. It's been more than 10 years since Maddie Locke left Spinifex. If you've actually read my book, The Baby Doctor, you would have met Maddie in that book. You don't have to read that book. This is a standalone book. But just in case you're one of these people who likes to meet characters in another book, this is Maddie's story. So the small outback town was where she gave birth to her daughter Bridget 11 years ago. Now she's back to prove she's got what it takes to run the medical centre and face the memories of that challenging time in her life. But everything's changed. The old pub is gone. Her new colleagues aren't pleased to see her, and it's drier and hotter than ever. Station owner Connor Fairhall thought he'd left the drama behind in Sydney, but moving to Spinifex with his rebellious son Jaden, who's around about Bridget's age, hasn't been the fresh start he's envisaged. His brother Kyle is drinking too much, and the only bright spot on the horizon is meeting Nurse Maddie, who's breathing new life into the weary town up the road little by little. Can Maddie ignore the rumours about Connor and risk her heart again? Or will the BUSH Telegraph spread along the wire fences and stand in the way of trust? This book is a romance, but it's also, that's just a facet of it. It also covers lots of themes. It covers drought, it covers outback towns and the camaraderie and the loss of camaraderie when people lose hope. It talks about issues of drinking in small country towns. I read a newspaper article about how country towns are really working for that and to help the young blokes that seem to think that drinking till drunk is a great thing. Well, we all know the world's moved on since then, and Maddie addresses some of those issues in this story. There's also a little on the domestic violence and the impact it can have on people long term. So there's a lot of really social comment in this book from a kind point of view and from Maddie's experiences, and it also teaches Maddie, who thinks that she needs to show her 11-year-old daughter that you don't need anyone. You can stand alone. You always stand alone. That's not how it needs to be, Maddie. And in this book, you'll learn that lesson, that you can be just as strong with people who really want to stand beside you. So BUSH Telegraph is actually a warm and fuzzy, sometimes dramatic, sometimes scary, sometimes, oh my goodness, everything's going to turn out all right. But because it's mine, Fiona MacArthur wrote this book, we have a happy ending, so please don't despair. You will have a baby born, because all of my books somewhere have a baby born inside them. I really, really, really like that. This would be perhaps because I've been a midwife, a country midwife, for more than 30 years. I'm retired now, just recently, and I still do my midwifery inside my books. My husband was an amazing country paramedic. He's also retired. So we get to travel and do things, and the new books of the future are from those travels. This book was actually set in Winton, near Winton, as I said, or Rangelands is a station that you can go and visit when you go to visit Winton up in Queensland. And it's an amazing vista, it's got mesas that are really the only remaining parts of the land while everything else is washed away. But what you've got are these cliff tops that just fall away onto the plateau below, and they call them jump ups, although the lady who did the tour that we went on said the jump up's really the drive that goes from the base to the top of the mesa. But just incredible scenery. If you haven't been outback Queensland, you really need to go for a run, because it's an amazing place with amazing people. And if you go to Winton, get onto Red Dirt Tours and they'll take you up to Rangelands, which was just an amazing afternoon. That the Outback Riders Festival at Winton, they have an Outback Riders Festival every July, end of June. And after the event that Jay Ford and I we were speaking at the Outback Riders Festival in 2019, and after the event was finished, which was amazing by the way, we were taken on this tour up to the top of Rangelands and given walked all around through and under the rocks. And there's a lot of description in the book from that evening, because it just resonated with me. It was just one of the most amazing places I've been to. So I was really, really pleased to be able to put that into Connor's station, and Connor could show Maddie all of these amazing things. We went up there, we had sunset drinks and beautiful cheeses, and it wasn't a diet at all, but it was just amazing, and it really stayed with me. So that's one of the benefits of writing is going off and seeing all these amazing places. So I guess that would be my inspiration and motivation for this book, was apart from the fact that I wanted to see what happened to Maddie, because I do feel that all my characters go on. Like, they don't just finish, their lives don't finish when I finish the book, they go on. So this is Maddie 11 years later, and I really, really enjoyed that. What did I most enjoy about writing it? I guess revisiting a place that just blew me away. So I'm a little bit of a photographer. An amateur photographer. That noise is my door blowing because the wind's coming up a bit. A bit of an amateur photographer, and I took some wonderful photos of up on those plateaus and the vistas and the just endless roads. And visiting back through that as I was writing the book was a really fun thing to do. Being with those people every day, just having those few conversations with these characters as we wrote on in the book, because it takes me around about 6 months to write a big book like this, something that's between 80 and 90,000 words. The town of Spinifex is full of characters. I mean, you know, you gotta love Australian outback characters. They're just wonderful. They're wonderful people. So, you know, we've got our grumpy nurses who thought they were going to be able to retire because they wouldn't be able to find anyone to run this centre. No one would come out here and live in this town. That's what they thought. So they were pretty well counting on their severance pay and their, the little lump sum that they were going to get for the sadness of not being able to work. That was what they wanted to retire, both Phyllis, and it was just, crazy stuff. But anyway, so Maddie arrives and here's this young thing going to teach them new tricks. So there's a nice little bit of conflict happening there, and some growth for those Rita and Phyllis to actually go through as they catch up with things that they've let go. There's an old guy in town who remembers Maddie from before, but there's only one. So it's not really about the past. It's all about a woman arriving in a town, barely knowing anyone, starting a new venture and proving to herself and her daughter that she's got what it takes to be the person who manages all these outback emergencies. If you think about that for a minute, it's a pretty big ask, isn't it? You don't have the backup of doctors, you don't have the backup of a hospital, you don't have the backup of an ambulance. You drive the ambulance, or your nurse drives the ambulance, and they bring that critical person to you. I did actually speak to some outback practitioners about the fact when they were the only people in one town, the only nurse in town, or one of two nurses in town. Like, how do you manage that responsibility? And she said to me in a very wise way that the people that I help are much better off because of what I can do than if I wasn't here. So I do the best that I can. I have the radio, and you have the telehealth now for talking to people and talking to doctors and getting expert advice. So that's helpful as well, and you just follow the orders. Well, makes it sound pretty easy, but I don't know. I really, really admire people who manage to help others in remote situations. So I really had a lot of fun writing that. What do we learn from Maddie when she returns to town? Well, I guess I've touched on that with the fact that she's got to learn that you can let people in. She was saved from her situation before, and now she wants to be able to save herself and prove to Bridget that her mother can save herself and that Bridget should stand alone too. So she has to learn to share. She has to learn to trust. And it's going to be pretty hard to trust Connor because he's got this big dark secret that seems to epitomise all the things that Maddie really is trying to escape from. So, yeah. There's a question here that says, tell us about your continuing journey from being a midwife to being an author. Well, I started writing nearly 30 years ago, so yeah, it's been a long journey. It took me 10 years to actually finish a book. So anybody who's writing their own book out there, don't give in. Maybe it won't take you 10 years to learn that you need to finish that first book before you start the second one, because I had lots of 3-chapter books and I couldn't understand why nobody wanted to buy those 3 chapters, because I'm sure I would have finished them immediately if they'd asked for them. Anyway, it took me 10 years to figure out that finish a book first and then send it away. And when I did that, I sold that first book. So I've been writing ever since, and I've written more than about 44, 45 books since then. And they're all different types of books, and that's the absolute beauty of writing nowadays is that you can have a traditional publisher like Penguin Random House, who publish my Outback books, and those books there behind me. You can have a small publisher like Chule in America, who publish my Outback Brides books. You can have self-published authors, and I publish some books self-published, which I really enjoy doing, just short books, but having the fun of doing covers and titles and editing myself. And so the world of writing is a really fascinating, interesting place now. And for readers, there is so many options. You can go to a fabulous library, obviously, and get anything online. And now you can get things, audiobook online, which is amazing. I'm so grateful to Penguin Random House for having all of my Outback romances on and medicals on audiobook with Belinda up until this one, and now with Penguin Random House narrators. And it's just so amazing to know that your book is on audiobook for those who have trouble reading the smaller print, and for people who are unable to hold a book, or just want to lie there and listen to a book, or like me, drive and listen to a book. I love audiobooks while I'm driving, so I do pay attention to the road, but I do enjoy reading my audiobooks while I'm listening to my audiobooks while I'm driving. And I listen to them at night. This is a pretty nice place to sit in the afternoon with a sunset drink and have your headphones on and listen to an audiobook. So if you haven't tried an audiobook, why don't you try one of these, one of the Fiona MacArthur audiobooks, and let me know what you think of it, because I really, really enjoy the diversity of the formats you can get books in now. What advice do I have for budding writers? Well, I guess that's pretty well the old finish the book. But you say, yes, but a book is such a huge thing. It's huge. How do I write all those words? How do I know where I'm going? It all starts with trust in yourself and believe in yourself. And that's a big part of what I put in my books, is that people can do anything that they want to do if you want it badly enough. And it doesn't have to be big and fast. When I first wrote for Penguin Random House, I was making sure that I wrote 500 words a day, which is only 2 pages, double-spaced on a computer. So, you could do 250 words a day and you'll have a 90,000 word book in 12 months. That's 1 page a day. If you just went forward and wrote that page without playing with it, then you would actually get to the end of a book in a year. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Something that we might talk about our whole lives. We might talk about for 60 years to write about a book. One day I'm going to write a book. Well, maybe one day you just start that book and you do your 250 words a day and go forward. I think the biggest problem is that we play with those first 2 chapters or the first chapter or even the first page. We think that I've got to have it perfect. If someone's going to read this, I've got to have it immaculate. I've got to have someone read it and make sure it's okay by then. And of course, their concept's going to be different to yours of being perfect. So, you know, you might find yourself playing with that first chapter for 6 months. Or you could do 250 words a day, every day, for 12 months and finish a book. Or 500 words a day like I do and finish one in 6 months. And if I want to do it in 3 months, it's 1,000 words a day. It's pretty easy. I find now that my writing's changed a bit, I tend to use voice recognition a bit. So I'm a pretty terrible hand writer, so I don't handwrite because I wouldn't be able to transcribe it later. I can type. I'm not a great typist. I'm a 2-finger typist. And, you know, I've done more than 40 books typing, and it's okay. But voice recognition is lovely because it's just like me sitting here talking to you. So I get into the character's head and I see what they're seeing and I hear what they're saying and I feel what they're feeling and I talk it out into my, well, I use a software program called Drag and Dictate, but sometimes when I don't have that with me, I'll just use Siri. I'll just do it on a email on my phone and I'll email those words to me. And, you know, you might have picked up 800 words in 15 minutes. So there's something to think about. If you haven't got a computer, if you haven't got you think you can't get those words down, you haven't got the time to sit down, maybe you're driving somewhere, you could talk. Maybe you're sitting in a train and you could talk into your headphones. Everybody would think you were just on the phone. Nobody cares. There's lots of ideas to think about. So all I can say is if you're a new writer or a beginning writer or an aspiring writer, write, okay? Get those words down and go forward. Stop playing with it. You can do it. It's really, really good fun. Which other writers inspire me? Oh my goodness, there are so many writers that inspire me. When I first started writing, before I'd written anything except a short story, I went to a conference in Sydney. It was the first Romance Writers of Australia conference because as a young woman with 4 young kids and then later 5 young kids, I had 5 boys in, fast timing, 4 and 4.5 years, and then I had a 7-year gap. So all boys. Anyway, I went to Sydney. I read about, we were still living up here, and my husband read about this conference in Sydney where people who want to write romance. And I thought, you know, everyone wants to write a Mills and Boon and make their fortune. Well, I didn't make my fortune writing Mills and Boon, although I do write Mills and Boon. I made my world, my friends, my travel, my life with Mills and Boon. It's just changed the whole world. And then as I moved on to Penguin Australia, I changed again. I got to go out back. I got to do all the things that I've always wanted to do with my husband. We could just drive and do research and meet people, and it's just such fun to do writing. So it's a really interesting world. So find yourself some writers like I did. Find some people who inspire you like I did. You'll find that writers are very generous. We share. There's two stories, you know. You could write the same set of events by 2 different people and they'd be totally different stories. So I never worry about sharing advice with people. I never worry about helping people. I never worry about encouraging people to put their stuff out there, because there's so many readers who want to read and there's so many writers who want to write and don't. So people who inspire me in Australia is Marion Lennox, who wrote more than 100 books for Harlequin. Leanne Moriarty, who wrote what she wanted to write, and her narrator for her Big Little Lies, Caroline Lee, does the narrating on my writing. And I was just so excited to think that I could share a narrator with Leanne Moriarty. Who else do I really... some American writers. I went to a conference with a lady called Eloisa James. She writes historical fiction. Speaking of historical fiction, Australia, Anne Gracie, she's an inspiring woman. I've got into, Eloise Jane's got me to try all these different genres. So I was just a straight romance person, like outback rural, Midwife on the Orient Express was a book I wrote. So some sort of, exotic places, wonderful things. But I went to this course with Eloisa James, and she said try all these different genres. So I discovered paranormal romance, which is just totally out there for what I read or listen to. And after I got over the shock of vampires on the ceiling and lots of discussion of blood, I actually really enjoyed the heroines, because you have to be tough if you're going to come up against all these paranormal beings, and that's what I found with paranormal writing. So then I got into Ilona Andrews and the Kate Daniels series, and I got into Janine Frost and the Vampire series, and then I got into, at the moment I'm a Faith Hunter fangirl. I'm sorry, I just love Faith Hunter books. And that actually happened through Audible, because they had a free Audible called Junkyard Cats, which was just a random 4-hour listen. And I loved the writing. I loved the heroine. It was totally off the wall and different. And so I got into Faith Hunter books, which I really, really love. If we take paranormal back to Australia, you can go to Kerry Arthur, who is an absolutely admirable woman who is self-made. She sold her Set in Melbourne paranormal series to a New York Times publisher. And when the climate changed, she became a self-published author and has a brilliant career going. And I just really admire her work ethic, her business sense. She's open to help. When I was putting out my first self-publishing books, she was keen as anything, no problem at all, would help me with anything that I wanted. So, there's a lot of women and male writers. Okay, talk a male writer. When I was a teen, I got into the Modesty Blaze books, which is Peter O'Donnell, and my dad got me into them, and she was a real heroine. See, I like kick bottom heroines, I really do. I think they're amazing. And Modesty Blaze, I actually rebought the books recently because they had their 50-year anniversary from when those books came out, so they reprinted the books, and I actually bought them because I'd worn out the other ones. So Peter O'Donnell was and Dick Francis is another male writer that I just love. If you ever want to read a first paragraph of a book, Dick Francis is the one that grabs you, and pulls you straight in. He's a brilliant writer. The early Wilbur Smith books I really enjoyed. The really funny thing about Peter O'Donnell was that I can't actually remember the name now. He writes as a woman, and he writes these long historical type heroines who are just as clever as Modesty Blaze, actually, but in amazing places. And I will try and think of his name. Email me and I'll tell you what the name is of that. And they were just amazing books, and I only discovered those about 3 years ago, and I think Peter O'Donnell's passed now. But there are so many inspiring, amazing authors out there, and all of them are generous. They really, really are. What am I reading at the moment? Well, at the moment, I'm in the middle of a book. So I'm doing the rural store for next year for Penguin. So I'm not doing a lot of reading. I'm doing a little bit of listening of Faith Hunter. I'm doing a little bit of listening on The Memory Illusion, which is a non-fiction book. And yeah, I'm just got to get this book down at the moment, and I'm sort of in their heads, so I don't really want to move into someone else's world. I'm in my own world at the moment for the rural store, so watch for that next year in September. So the BUSH Telegraph comes out on the 1st of September this year, and the rural store will come out on the 1st of September next year with Penguin Random House. How have I been spending the last few months while all this lockdown has been going on? Well, as you can see from here, it's not a hardship. I have been doing a little bit more housework than I normally do. I don't normally do that. I've been doing a little bit more cooking, as most people have. Although I'm not adventurous, I have a very limited repertoire of meals, and my husband makes his own dinners, thank goodness, because sometimes I get very sidetracked, or he would starve, the poor dear. But I've just been sitting in my office and writing and enjoying, and yeah, I've taken up a bit of photography, as I mentioned before. So if you see me on Facebook, you'll see Fiona MacArthur, author, on Facebook. There's lots of sunrises and sunsets over here. So the sunrise is obviously over in the ocean, but over here, the colours that reflect from sunrise 30 kilometres away is just amazing. So I'm always taking photos of sunrises. Last night's clouds were just to die for. They were just, the whole sky was bright orange and cloudy. It was just so beautiful. There's a lot of things to be thankful for. So when I start writing in the morning, I get up very early, or fairly early, between 4:30 and 5, and it's dark. And I come outside here and I stand on the grass and I do a few little exercises and I look at the stars, and yeah, I do my grateful list, and then I write my list for what I want to achieve today in my writing, and then I drink my green tea for the next hour and a half until my husband gets up, and then he goes off for a walk for 2 hours and I finish my writing. So by the time he's home at 10:30, I'm done for the day. And that way I don't feel guilty that I haven't written, because it's the first thing I did this morning. And I really only have to get 500 words. So if I get 2,500, then woohoo, go me. I try to take weekends off. I find that social media sucks you in. So sometimes I'll try not and go on to Facebook or Instagram or anything like that until after I've got my words. But yeah, I've been spending my time just moving along, and it's actually been really lovely. And I feel for those people who have suffered and lockdown and family sickness, and that's just horrid. I've been blessed. I used to rush all the time. I was the traveller, so I would be home or away more than I was home. My husband manages very well on his own, luckily, and he enjoys the quiet, I think. But basically I should be in Peru, or I should be coming home from Peru today. So I'm a bit of a traveller. I like to write books about exotic places as well as books about Australian places. So my husband comes with me in Australia and I go with girlfriends, other writer friends, if I'm writing overseas. So no, I'm really pleased I got my Egypt trip in 2018. I'm really pleased I got to see my aunt in London at the beginning of the year, really early. And yeah, I'm home for the duration, and it's actually really nice just to slow. So yeah, read some books, meet some people, do some videos. So yeah, it's just been a blessing for me. And then the last question was, what's the next big project? Well, I guess I talked a little bit about being the rural store next year, so that's my next big project. We all know we had a wild year last year with or 6 or 8 months ago, with the drought and then the fires. My son actually runs a rural store upriver, and the one I'm writing about is up near the border of Queensland. But it gives me a little bit of insight into upriver towns and the amazing camaraderie and the issues and the terrifying, relentless ferocity of advancing bushfires after absolutely desiccating people with drought. So how do people pick themselves up from this? How do you support other people? What do you need to be aware of? It's a wonderful book. I'm really enjoying it. I'm loving my heroine. Her name's Gracie, and she's pregnant, and she's gonna have the baby, of course. You know that every single one of my books has got a baby, right? You don't have to see all the gory bits. It's okay. It's just the joy and the wonder and the drama of it all that I love. But maybe that's because I was a midwife. So yeah, the next big project is the BUSH Telegraph comes out on the 1st of September, and the rural store comes out on the 1st of September next year. So I guess that's me. That's what I'm writing about. And I hope you really, really enjoy the BUSH Telegraph. Whether you read it, whether you listen to it, whether you get it in a book to hold, or whether you get it on an ebook. I wish you joy and pleasure and smiles. And I thank you very, very much for listening to me this morning as I rambled on from the farm.